equity and value creation. So we've got an excellent set of panelists this afternoon. And what we are trying to do in this panel is span the entire spectrum of Indian industry, right from startups to established business houses, to try and understand the role innovation is playing in their business strategies and how they are deriving value out of innovation. Today, many people believe that the harbingers of India's innovation story are startups. So I'm going to start with the startup representatives on this panel. And I'm going to start by talking to Ankit, who is right next to me. Ankit, just want to understand from you, what are the one or two really big innovations you have seen in your company? Ankit works with a company called Ad Pushup, which basically looks at advertising optimization. So Ankit, what are the two big innovations you see, and what are the challenges you find in sort of keeping your innovation engine going?
Thanks. So at Ad Pushup, we work in the optimization space on the internet advertising domain. Please brace yourself with certain jargons. So one of the key things which has happened in the last 1 year, in our organization, is that we've developed a core technology which is called auto analysis engine. So in the internet space today, when people place ads on their website, they use things which are called like JavaScripts, and they have to be manually placed on pages. What we've done is we've built some sort of artificial intelligence which is able to understand pages and automatically understand if a page is long form, short form, gallery, images, whatever, and basis that automatically create ad units on that page without any human intervention. So that has been one key technology innovation which we've done in the last year or so. Regarding the second question about what has helped us, I would say two key aspects which really help innovation in an organization are the people and the environment, right? And when we talk about people, it's not just who you hire, but also about how you hire them. Asking the right questions, understanding, and even your selection processes, right? Removing all the biasnesses which you have, promoting diversity. And when we talk about environment, this would mean a lot of things, including, creating the right culture. In our opinion, culture is the most important factor when it comes to the environment. What we internally promote is something which we call AMPT, autonomy, mastery, purpose, and transparency, which are the key 4 pillars. And that have really, really helped us a lot.
Yeah, so often the Indian education system is criticized a lot for not sort of producing very creative people. So do you find that a problem in this approach which you are using?
The biggest challenge which we face, when we get people, who are trained by the, so to speak, the education system, the biggest challenge is, teaching them how to unlearn, So that's something, which we face very often. But apart from that, we feel that, the kind of resources and the talent pool which we have in India, it's unparalleled, and, it's as good as what you'll find globally or in the Valley or other places.
Okay, so I have a last question for you. So how do you find the challenge of keeping ahead of others? Because the space in which you operate is a global space. You have players all over the world. So how do you make sure that you're keeping ahead of what everybody else is doing?
Well, one thing which we do is we don't look at the competition. So no, subconsciously, consciously, whatever you said, if you're closely monitoring the competition, which is unorthodox, if I were to say, maybe compared to large organizations, it sort of deviates you from, where you could independently go. In our approach of not really focusing a lot, and I'm talking about on the technology side, not on the business side, but if you don't focus and you don't try to learn or understand what your competition is doing, that is something which has helped. So we did not come from the advertising domain. And our initial product, was something which a lot of industry experts said, this is something which may not even work. So by not being an expert in this space and having that new thought process is something which has really helped us beat the competition, if I were to say that.
Okay, so I'd like to turn to Abhinav now. Abhinav is a co-founder of Eco Financial Services, which is in the fintech space. And Abhinav, would you agree with what Ankit was saying, or what's your perspective on both? How do you keep ahead in innovation, and in the course of that also tell us one or two of the main innovations you have done?
Thanks a lot. I almost completely agree with Ankit. Our experience, to introduce Eco to everyone, Eco, we are a fintech company. We operate a semi-closed wallet. A wallet, we have a license from Reserve Bank of India. And the big difference that what Echo does is compared to some of the digital wallets that you and I would be customers of, is that we cater to customers in India who earn between 10,000 rupees and 50,000 rupees in cash. So unlike the wallet solution that you and I use, which we use on a daily basis and fund it using credit card, debit card, or internet banking, we cater to a customer segment which is earning in cash, and therefore none of these things are applicable to them. And one of the things that when we started to operate as a wallet, the biggest question for us was, what do we do when somebody who's way ahead, and it's not a very, it's the new space, but there were companies which were way ahead of where Echo was. So I think the biggest innovation, I think, in terms of some of the things that were mentioned in the earlier talk, was that we had to really step back, not look at the competition, say, where is the white space? Where is the blue ocean available here? And what we realized is that the big lacuna that was available was the fact that in India, 80% of the Indians continue to earn in cash. And if all the fintech solutions put together, if we do a fantastic job over the next 5 years, we'll probably bring that down to 80% to 60%. So the huge opportunity that was available that nobody was looking at was people who are earning in cash. And we went ahead and built that. And over the last 12 months, we've got close to about 15 million customers. We had close to about 7 lakh wallets per month. And I was speaking to somebody, before we kind of took this decision, and he shared this data point with us that Apple continues to sell more MacBook product in Australia than in India. Nike continues to sell more sporting products in Australia than in India. Dell continues to sell more computers in Australia than in India. And I asked him, why are you going on talking about Australia? And he said, one Australia is equivalent to one Delhi. And still they continue to sell more. So you guys have to look at a customer base which everybody is not looking at. And as long as we started to do that, there was a huge open ocean which opened up. So one was to be very clear about the customer category that we are looking at. Thereafter, what the big innovation that we've done is that when we looked at the customer segment that we had to, and we are looking at this point in time, we actually created the world's Echo is globally the only company which can do a secure transaction on a feature phone without downloading any app on the SIM card of the phone. So because we cater to a customer segment, and this customer segment is also maturing from a feature phone category to a smartphone category, we continue to serve them on the feature phone, and we still have to, as a fintech player, we need to make sure that their transactions are secure. So I think as an organization, we had to we had to do a very good, hard look at the customer base that we're looking at. And then when we were sure about the customer base, we had to look at the technology that was available in the platform and then kind of innovate and go ahead with it.
Yeah, so just a follow-up question. So it's quite likely that many of your customers will graduate to better phones over time. So how will you maintain your lead in terms of the product at that point of time?
Actually, thanks for asking that question. It is almost a Kodak moment that we are about to hit. Our biggest innovation has been the innovation around the authentication, how we authenticate a financial transaction on a feature phone. We've gone ahead and even patented it in the US, and we even received a patent for that. And we are so conscious about it that patent should not allow us to not innovate when the customer segment changes. And thankfully, at least because some of these things have happened, Nokia is something, or BlackBerry is something that has happened, while we've grown up, while we've seen these industries change. So I think as entrepreneurs right now, I think we are a lot more conscious about some of these mistakes that have happened by larger organizations. And we are just being very open to some of these changes. And I hope that Echo is one organization which is able to ride as the customer is changing.
Yeah, last question to you. So how would you foster innovation in your company?
I would completely agree to Ankit's answer. I think it goes right from the beginning of hiring to everyday processing. And I actually believe that everybody is innovative. It's a question of you put the person in a right environment. I think everybody would come out with bright ideas or things like that. I don't think so. An entrepreneur who just out of college can innovate and somebody who's worked for 15 years cannot. But I think if you take that 15-year-old guy in a corporate office and change his environment, I think he can come up with great ideas as well. So I think it is less about, I think one has to concentrate on great people. But once you have a great set of people, I think what really then starts to triggering is the environment that you put them in. As long as they feel comfortable, as long as 99 mistakes can be made before and as soon as possible, as long as that environment is given, I think innovation will start to happen.
Great, thanks a lot. Let me turn to Vaidishwaran now. Vaidhi, you are heading Manipal Global Education Services. And there's a broad belief that if Indian education is to really become effective, we have to scale it with technology. So can you tell us a little bit of from your company's perspective, what is the role of technology and innovation in improving the effectiveness of delivery of all the various forms of education you are doing?
Sure. Thanks, Rishi. Firstly, of course, to go back to what Ankit said, we are partners in both. We educate people through university and we train. So we do the learning and unlearning. So at least we give them back to you status quo. So that's one part of the work that we do. But talking of technology, two things come to my mind. One more as a global phenomena, which under the topic of innovation. From a higher education, I think technology has been the biggest disruptor, if you will. We have things like the MOOC, which came up a couple of years back and sort of completely transformed the way the learning can happen globally. Closer home at our end, just one particular example which might sort of reinforce the power of technology that we have. And I think it came out more from a stimulus of the marketplace. You can call them a customer or a client or environment. What really happened was we are India's largest banking academy. We train close to around 25,000 officers of around 35 banks in this country, both in the public and private sector space. And one of these constant expectations from the client has been that in the time that these officers are with you, how do you continue to give them more and more inputs to handle the changing marketplace? Maybe a mobile wallet, maybe digital stuff, maybe going out to do multi-product sales and so on and so forth. So something that we hit across and technology played a big role was, we sat down and said, why would we want to look at that the officers are with you only for 8 hours in a day between, let's say, 8 in the morning and 5 in the evening, since they're all residential programs. Can we look at using this time that they are with you for much more meaningful interactions? And then was this whole concept, which today is called flipped classes, came up, where we completely digitized the programs that we were doing for our officers, and everything that could potentially be done offline, which is not required by the faculty interventions in the class, was put in, digitized, put into a tablet, and we had around 1,500 officers of a particular bank which wanted to work with us on this collaborative mode. Overnight, these young officers had the digital tablets with them. So everything that they had to learn, which was potentially learnable offline, was available to them. So when they came into the class, there was much more of time available. And when we did some computation of it, we had close to 30% of the student time and the faculty time became surplus. And we could potentially use it either to support them with more inputs and more ideas from the bank, or for internships or various other things. It was like a factory where you suddenly release 30% of the conveyor time that we could do. This is one of the things that come to my mind.
So are there challenges in your business in terms of protecting the value that's created by innovation? How do you go about doing it? I mean, we just heard Abhinav saying that they have taken patents and so on, but in your kind of business, how do you make sure that you get value out of the innovation you do?
I think, well, on one dimension of this, it's interesting you ask, because today almost everything is available in open source from a content perspective. So again, as an example, if you go and go into Google and want to do digital marketing as a program, there would be possibly 35 people who claim the best of program that's available in the country, and by and large, everyone would offer a very similar content to you. So in my view, it's while plagiarism, etc., is obviously not on, but the IP is more an experiential learning that is there, more becoming relevant in today's context. It's not so much core content that I can look at it. The ideas become an IP, the experience of a student learning becomes an IP, the whole ecosystem of he or she spending that time with you, being engaged. That's something which you could potentially look at and not allow it to be replicated.
And finally, very quickly, what do you do to drive innovation in your company? How do you encourage people, motivate them, and so on?
Yeah, so I mean, politically correct statements would be to say that you encourage people to do innovation, and you want a DNA in the organization and so on and so forth. But I know I'm getting into difficult terrains with someone like you around here. But the honest answer is that I think somewhere there is a push coming up in terms of there is a compulsion, which is an external force which comes to you. And people have to be encouraged to, at that point of time, look at non-conventional ideas. I think if you could have an example that Okay, put them in a room and say, okay, guys, talk about 10 different things other than what you've been doing. I think invariably it comes up, one. Second, I think as an organization, we encourage that if you fail, it's a good thing to happen. I know it looks very, jingoistics to say this, but it's actually okay to fail. Because the type of failures that people would do are not going to bring down the organization in a very large. There'll be small mistake, they'll make a couple of lakhs, will go down in terms of an experimentation. But then it builds the culture of saying, unless you go and disrupt something, you're not going to do innovation. We are still a long way to go as an organization, but I can see that keeping pace with technology, keeping pace with mobile apps, some of the stuff that our teams are doing are clearly ahead of the curve.
And do you see startups as threats?
No, honestly, we are using a whole lot of startups today to support the work that we do. We see them very, very complementary to the type of work that we're doing. It would not be right on our part to look at the nimbleness or the agility that a startup can bring. We are a much larger organization. I would rather take the best of both worlds, use the startups to do it and sort of bake it into the larger system.
Thanks. Okay, can I turn to Mr. Sharma? Mr. Sharma is the Chairman and Managing Director of Ion Exchange India Limited. So we all know today that water is a huge issue in the country. Getting people access to clean drinking water is an issue. Environmental pollution and all related phenomena are, of course, challenges before all of us. So given that you work in this broad space, could you tell us a little bit about where do you see the main challenges in innovation and what is your company doing in that direction?
Our company is about 52 years old. And when we started, it was actually a subsidiary of a British company. So unlike the entrepreneurs here, and we should be able to provide a total solution to the community and the industry.
How do you benchmark the innovation activity in your company? Do you compare with global competitors? Do you look at competitors in India? And what's the reference point for you?
Our benchmark is international. Just to give you an example of ion exchange resin, which I started off with, the company started with the technology transfer. We set up the R&D. The R&D has produced at least one product every year which has been patented. And today we are exporting more than 40% of ion exchange resin which we produce globally. So my product is as good as any international product. So we always benchmark whatever we are doing in terms of development or technology or process to what is happening internationally, which is the best, and then you produce that product. If you can't produce, then you do a joint venture or a tie-up technology transfer, but you want to bring the best to the country.
And what do you see as the main methods of protecting your innovations? Is it largely patenting or is it more branding and market action? I mean, how do you really go about protecting and making sure you get value out of the innovation you do?
Well, in today's world, it's very difficult. We all know how the information is available through the internet. Even patents can be tweaked. I think it's experience and knowledge, finally. It's the pool of experienced people and the knowledge, because knowing something is one thing, but applying and handling it another thing. So the application knowledge which the company has over the last 50 years, it keeps us ahead of the competition, and also to some extent we are able to protect the technology which we developed for a couple of years. But it can't be very long because everybody is catching up.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma. Let me turn to Shashank Surana now. Shashank is the Vice President for New Product Development with the DS Group. So Shashank, can you tell us maybe very briefly about your group, and then also tell us what role you see for innovation and new product development in your group?
DS Group is an 87-year-old conglomerate. We have interests, multi-diversified interests in food and beverages, to dairy, to mouth fresheners, tobacco. So we are present in most of the sectors, in this area. And one of our key strengths is quality, and innovation is one of our pillars. And we believe in, we give a lot of emphasis on innovation and quality. Also, the important thing is that we decode the consumers. It's very important to understand your consumer. If you don't understand your consumer, innovation will not make sense. So you need to understand the consumer. As far as the innovation is concerned, we have been credited with a lot of innovations since a long time. And the latest innovation that we have done is in the hard-boiled candy segment, which is the pulse candy. So it's a hard-boiled candy which has tanginess in it. I hope everybody's tasted that pulse. If not, then please try. It's a category breaker. I would say it's broke all the rules of the category. The category was becoming stagnant. You know, there was a need of innovation required in that category. Very, very important. And that was missing, you know, big players. So, you know, when we ventured into the confectionery area in the chewing gum segment, we wanted to get into the hard-boiled candy as it is a natural progression. We thought we'll not get with the regular one. You know, if you need to succeed, you need to get with something which is differentiated. It's a value addition, and the consumers, they treat it as it's, you know, value for money. So we thought of this, and you know, it's important to decode the consumer, as I mentioned. So it's important that you decode the consumer, take the insights from the consumer, and develop the product, and that is how Pulse was born.
Okay, so, you know, Steve Jobs was many times quoted as saying that, you know, I don't try to find out what consumers want by going and asking them. I've got to be one step ahead and try and anticipate and see what are the needs maybe they even they haven't imagined. So what's your you know, approach or process? You said you talked a lot about decoding the consumer. So how do you decode? I mean, is it that you try to imagine what the consumer wants, or do you believe a lot in market research? How do you go about this process?
I think it's a very good question, and it's contrary to what Steve Jobs said, but I think it's his technology. But what we do is basically how we decode the consumer is, you know, you need to understand the consumer from his behavior, his patterns, his lifestyle. So all of these, you know, if we see India is a youth country, so we can't negate the youth, and you need to study the youth. The children aspire the youth, and the adults want to be youth again. So youth is a center point. It's an important thing. So you need to understand, and what do the consumers need today? You know, if I talk about the food habits of an Indian youth, he wants to change every time. So he cannot have the same dal roti every day. So he's having Mexican, he's having Italian. So he wants to experiment. And that experimentation is very important. And that is where innovation plays its role. And that is how you can innovate, because the consumers today wants to experiment. And that is how you know, we decode the consumers.
So, you know, this process is likely to be a process which involves lots of experiments, because not every one of these new ideas you come up with is going to succeed. So how do you deal with this success and failure mix that you're going to have?
Very true. You know, Pulse took about 2.5 years to get here. And you absolutely said it right. Sensory is very important. As you mentioned, that a lot of trials, you need to understand the consumer from what kind of flavors he likes, what kind of amalgamation in the flavors that he likes. So for example, in Pulse, when we launched the first flavor, it was Kacha Aam. The category, 50% of the category was mango, and raw mango contributed 26%. It was important to get with the popular flavor, but not as a popular one, but something different with the popular flavor. And interestingly, if you you know, see that we have a habit of having tanginess with our fruits, and raw mango is the king of all. You cannot have a raw mango without a tanginess on it. So that was the insight that we captured, and I think that the consumers didn't tell us that they need it, but we captured that insight from the consumers and developed that product and gave it to the market. And consumers loved it. Consumers loved it to the extent that they had their all, they were word of mouth marketing started from the consumers. And before we were there on the marketing platforms, they were already there, and they were supporting Pulse. They owned the brand. So it's very important to own the brand, and consumers did that.
And how do you protect yourself against copying, imitation? I mean, must be, in this kind of a segment, it's not too difficult to copy a product, right?
Yes, after Pulse, there were about, now about 60 of them or 70 of them, I don't know the right number now. But we take the legal route. So we have already approached the you know, legal route, and we have told a lot of people, we have given a lot of messages to the industry that, you know, if you have a better product, come with a better design. Don't copy the design at least. You know, if you have a better product, let's face it in the market. You know, let's go all out. We brought this category, we brought this new innovation in this category take that innovation, but do something more innovative in that. You know?
Okay, so the last panelist on our panel is Ganesh Suryanarayanan from the Tata Group. He works in the Group Technology and Innovation Office at the Tatas. Now, if you look at the whole innovation portfolio of the Tatas, it's been quite impressive in the last decade or so. We saw major investments in products like the Nano, we saw the Swachh water filter, and there was a whole wave of innovation which was going through the group. And now we see the Tatas going on to a kind of next generation of looking at innovation, looking at a lot of collaborations with foreign universities, trying to expand the range of technologies in the group. So can you very briefly tell us what are the kind of challenges you see at the group level for innovation, and what are some of the specific initiatives the group is taking?
Sure. Yeah, like you said, the Tata Group is, it's a huge one. It's not an easy decoding of any individual company. The group, I work for the GTIO of Tata Sons, and Tata Sons by itself is a holding company, but it still has investments in the order of hundreds of billions of dollars. And how we're different, if you see across the last 150 years, it's a kind of a federal structure. It's not like your Berkshire Hathaway, which is completely hands-off, or it's not like a GE, which is a complete command and control structure. So it's kind of in the middle. So and the ownership also is 50% or 25% maximum Tata Sons. So how do you drive innovation across such a large group and still keep things going as a group is an interesting problem. Way we have done this is that we are looking at three different approaches, and the GTIO is about a year and a half old, and we want to basically be a catalyst organization. And what was missing in the Tata Group over the last several decades was that every company was doing its own thing, and it is completely fine doing that, but there was no leverage, there was no synergies across companies. So the group that we have, that we created, is basically a catalyst organization that does things in 3 dimensions. One dimension is we actually develop global first products. For example, I am in charge of developing a factory wearable for safety, for factory safety workers in the factory domain. And this is a very innovative product because Tata has a huge worker force, and there is nothing like this in that complete segment. So we've melded technology, a social need, and of course regulatory needs, put it together. So we want to lead by example. So our group actually develops and delivers global first product solutions that we patent, and we actually have an IPR roadmap around that. That is one thing. So at the group level, we have taken resources, expertise, background IP from group companies, built stuff together, and delivered for group companies. And this is something that we want to do as we go along in 4 different domains. One is food security. We want to work in energy security, consumers, wellness, factory analytics. So these are 4 areas that we've been identified as global first products that the group technology office has to deliver. So we lead by example, number 1. That gives all the group companies a chance to work together and be part of a larger organization, a larger cause. Second thing what we do is we also realize that from a Tata Group point of view, the number of patents we've had is not earth-shattering by any means, right? So how do you get there? So you have to start thinking of innovation across group companies. So we have done a lot of programs inside Tata called Open Innovista, Open Innovation, where we encourage problems to be placed across group companies, and you have people deputed across group companies working across different problems. And sometimes problems are not solved by your domain experts, by different people, right? That's what we do. One more thing we've done is we have started working very closely with the world's leading universities, because depth of knowledge is something that we have to improve on. So we've gotten into, there's no dearth of investment money, but there's a dearth of intellectual capital sometimes. So can we look at future technologies, future areas of improvement across the group companies in specific areas? For example, working with Yale, Harvard, MIT on specific problems in machine learning, specific problems in bioinformatics, biomedical, health. So we are giving them grants. We're working on specific problems from our office, And we hope that we start seeing some results in the next 3 to 5 years. And those results get translated through our group into group companies. So it's a new way of thinking, and hopefully it's a catalyst to get the old way of thinking out of Tata.
So does this approach of collaboration also include working with startups?
Absolutely. By the way, I am less than 2 years into Tata. I'm an ex-entrepreneur. I'm still an entrepreneur. I lived in the US for about 15 years. I had my own company there. Came back to India, started my own company. And Dr. Gopi hired me because I'm out of Bangalore, by the way. So our lab is actually an accelerator. So we've just started to invite startups to come work with us. The idea is to be an accelerator and to take equity in those companies and see if the Tata brand can be given to those people as market. And in the process, we also learn from that. So it's quite an interesting challenge, which is why I took on the opportunity.
Shashank, do you work with startups at all?
Not at the moment.
And Mr. Sharma? Just maybe tell us what kind of relationships you have.
If you find a process or a product which is got a potential, we do work with either we collaborate with them or buy it out, license it. That is how we work with them.
This will be both Indian and
or
global?
we take the marketing too.
This will be global as well as Indian startups, or?
Yeah, both.
Okay.
If any technology which is different and which we think it will take time for us to develop and it has got features, then we tie up with them.
Okay, thanks a lot. So I think we have about a couple of minutes. If any quick questions from the audience, anyone would like to ask. My only request to you is keep your question really short, because we just have about 5 minutes left. Yeah, please, gentlemen there. Yeah, please stand. Yeah. Yeah, just speak loud. Somebody's coming there with the mic. Yeah.
So I'm in this space where innovation get captured in the form of patents, so essentially a patent attorney. So my question is for any one of you to answer. I mean, when we look at the patent office reports, there are, let's say, 50,000 odd patents that are filed every year. Almost 70 to 75% of those come from the foreign companies. So, I mean, when we talk about innovation, I mean, are we really innovating, or are we just really solving the problems to capture the market?
Okay, so maybe we'll just take the other question as well. There was somebody else close by. Yeah, can you just ask your question as well?
Quick question for Abhinav. Yeah. Abhinav, really liked your model. So I was kind of discussing with one of my friends also who came up with solving the chiller problem through your model. Well, the question is not about that. If you apply your template, can we really look into and tap into the parallel economy, the black economy that's going on with us? It's, believe me, it's the size is as big as the regulated economy. Do you think you can kind of think into it, or maybe a couple of years down the line, we can make a model that will,
So any other question anyone would like to ask? Yes, please. Just pass the mic there, please.
Hi, I'm Vipul, and the question is to Shashank. I just want to understand, in your category where replication is so easy and fast, does the cost of innovation even cover the cost of sales?
Okay, great. So let's take those questions. I'm going to start with the first one. So I'd request Ganesh and Mr. Sharma, maybe you could take that up. So there's this question, 2/3 of the patents in India are actually filed by foreign companies. So are Indian companies really innovating? I mean, how do we, what conclusion can we reach on that? Yeah.
I mean, we do file patents, and we have more than 50 patents which we filed in India, and some of them are global. So I think there are Indian companies, and there are many pharmaceutical companies who are continuously filing patents.
Yeah, but if you sort of take out pharma, then the number falls very drastically.
That's right. It does. But there are chemical companies who are doing it, and I'm sure some consumer durable companies are coming up.
Yeah.
So
Ganesh?
Yeah. Yeah, to answer your question, yes, the majority are from MNCs, but I can say from my own experience in Tata, we are not just trying to solve problems, we're actually looking ahead. If you look at companies like TCS, they have a huge R&D team, a huge set of people who are only churning out patents in areas such as machine learning, deep learning, which are areas out for the future. You look at Tata Steel is changing from a steel company to a materials company. So at least that's the intent. So if you look at technologies such as graphene, the huge amount of patents that Tata Steel has already done. So yes, it's known that Indian companies are not at the same pace at MNCs, but it is definitely changing because it has to change. There is no other way out.
Yeah, part of the answer, if you don't mind my sort of suggesting, is what Dr. Virmani was talking about. That if you look at many Indian companies, they are not really operating at the technological frontier. They're usually a bit behind the frontier, and a lot of the work they're doing is more incremental in nature. So a lot of it doesn't seem to involve patenting, though there may be a fair amount of other kinds of innovative work going on, but it doesn't seem to get translated into patents. So let's
Also, just one point, if you see.
No, I think I just have to request you because we have 2 other questions. Maybe you can just take it offline. Yeah.
Just a startup question. When I work with the venture capitalists, so because there is, and I asked them, I said, look, in your second round of funding, why don't we start thinking about raising the bar of the innovation and looking at the IP capturing part of it? And they say, look, that is not part of our discussion at this stage. So
okay, great, thanks. That's a good input. So let's shift to Shashank. So Shashank, there was a question about, do you recover the cost of innovation with all this imitation going on? Yeah.
I think, as I mentioned, the imitation to the extent, if I just give an example, the kind of thing that you just mentioned, that, we found some duplicate products in the jar of Pulse, and that is how they were playing into the market. And your question is very valid. Yes, sometimes it is difficult, but if your innovation is, you've put a lot of, you have deep dived into, what we call the KYC cube model, and know your consumer, know your category, and know the company, what strengths you have, then I think the chances of recovering would be very higher on the
I
higher
guess the other issue is also, whether you recover value or not depends on your brand, depends on distribution, depends on many other things.
So
if you
know your company, your strengths, your weaknesses.
Yeah. So finally, now Abhinav, there was a question about whether you're going to solve the black money problem once and for all. Yeah, please.
I think there's a chief guest, Mr. Sinha, who's about to speak in the evening. I think the question should be directed to him. As far as, I would want to comment, we operate under a wallet license. The wallet allows for cash funding to happen. It's not a, it's because Echo as an organization concentrates on cash funding, it leads to a model which is not an internet company. So we are not a very internet company. So cash funding happens, and there are rules around this. How much cash funding can happen, whether there are KYC norms, limits, everything. So I don't think so RBI or the government looks at wallet companies and wallet companies looking at cash as a method to fund, as a tool to solve black money. We are just saying we are catering to a customer segment which is massive in India, and embracing cash, at least as an entrepreneur and a practitioner, I believe that in order to get a lot of digital payments to happen, it's important to embrace cash. If we do that, probably the journey will be faster.
Okay, so I'll leave Vaidi with the last comment and then we'll close the panel.
Yeah, sure. No, I think there was a question most of us were asked with regard to whether you work with startups, and there was a gentleman talking about it. My 2 cents on that is that while startups, certainly most of them look at, since you said PE, etc., more in terms of the valuation game that they are running into. But from my own company perspective, we invested in half a dozen startups who are in the similar ecospace. And the barometer by which we measure the returns is not in terms of the valuation of that firm, but in terms of the value that they add to the end products that both of us are in. So I think if we continue to support startups more in terms of not just getting into a valuation game, but extending the ecosystem of whatever product lines that you have, it's going to be better for you.
Great. Thanks a lot. Can you give a big round to all our participants?